Hi, I'm Marissa, Chief Entomologist at Thanksgiving Point, and today I'm looking for pollinators at Ashton Gardens. So pollinators are animals that move pollen from flower to flower while they're looking for food like nectar and pollen to feed themselves and to their young. Pollinators can be insects like bees and butterflies, or they can be vertebrate animals like bats and hummingbirds. The pollination is usually accidental, but when it happens, the flowers are able to form fruits full of seeds, and then the plants are able to reproduce and create new future plants. A lot of times those fruits are edible to humans, and so protecting pollinators is really important to us from an agricultural standpoint to make sure we can still eat. Outside of humans, the vast majority of flowering plants rely on pollinators for reproduction. And then think about all the animals that rely on those plants for food and for shelter. So the biodiversity and health of almost every land-based ecosystem is directly dependent on pollinators and their presence. So they're really important. So let's check out some of the pollinators doing helpful pollinating work in the spring here at Ashton Gardens. So we've got a really awesome riot of color in this bed behind me, but it's not actually the tulips here that are attracting the bees. In a lot of botanical gardens, the flowers that are selected to showcase are often hybridized so that they're the best shapes and the best colors that humans deem to be beautiful. And a lot of times that hybridization can cause the plant to not be able to reproduce and not produce pollen. And so that's not attractive to the bees at all. There's no reward for them to come visit that flower. So the flowers in this bed that are actually attracting our bees are the wallflowers. So those are the little ones in between. And this is a really fragrant annual that our horticulture team plants in the fall, and then they pull them out in the spring after they're done blooming. And we can see that there are a lot of different bees and flies that are attracted to these flowers. So I'm so excited to have found this lady. This is a queen bumblebee, and this is Hunt's bumblebee, Bombus huntii. I can tell she's a queen because she's enormous. She's definitely bigger than most worker bumblebees that we'll see. Bumblebees are big and fuzzy. They fly slowly, so they're one of the most recognizable bees that you'll find here in Utah and at Ashton Gardens. And I can tell her species because she's got this characteristic red stripe. She's got yellow, red, red, yellow. So that's how I can tell that this is her. So bumblebee queens emerge in the spring as the temperatures warm up. They've already gone on a date in the fall with the bee of their dreams. They've got their sperm stored, and in the spring she's going to be able to start her colony. So the reason she's out right now is because she doesn't have one yet. She's doing all the work. She's probably got some eggs in a hole somewhere. She's now collecting pollen to be able to feed to those larvae, and once those larvae grow up and become adult bees, they'll take over doing all the work, and then she'll just become that queen bee that lays all the eggs in the hive. Her colony is probably going to live for about 3 months, at the end of which she'll create some more queen bees and some males, and they'll go out and mate, and the cycle will start all over again. Bumblebees are really efficient pollinators, and that's because they can do something called buzz pollinating. So when they get into a flower, they can continue to vibrate their body, and it shakes off a whole lot more pollen. It gets all over their body. So that just makes them super efficient at collecting pollen. In fact, bumblebees are used a lot in agriculture. They're really excellent at pollinating crops like tomato and eggplant and blueberry. So they are partly domesticated, and we use them a lot in greenhouse agriculture. So when we think about bees, we think about really fuzzy bugs. And the hairs on bees are actually specially designed to help them be efficient pollinators. They're very branched, which makes them more sticky or clingy to the pollen. And they also have a slightly positive static charge, which attracts the kind of negative charged pollen. So they're kind of like magnetic Velcro, these hairs on the bee bodies. So that's why they are such effective pollinators. So I want you to notice how close I am sitting to these honeybees that are foraging right now. Probably closer than a lot of you are comfortable with being near bees. They're not worried about me at all. It is true that a lot of bees have stingers and venom, and that can cause us to feel some pain and some swelling. For those of us that are allergic, we can have stronger reactions to bee venom. But when they're looking for food, and this is for honeybees specifically, they're not near their colony. They're not feeling defensive behaviors towards their hive. So me being close to them right now is not threatening. And I can even touch a bee and she won't sting me. She didn't even hardly fly away from me. So I'm not a threat to their life right now. There's no reason to sting me because I'm not near the colony. And actually the vast majority of bees don't live in colonies. They're solitary, so they just don't have a colony to feel defensive about. There's also a myth that bees die instantly, or they can only sting you one time and then they die. That's really only true for honeybees. They have a barb on their stinger, so it does rip part of their abdomen out when they sting you. All the other bees are capable of stinging multiple times if they are capable of stinging. But again, you really have to provoke a bee. Like, you basically have to have it in your hand squishing it, or you're sitting on it, or you're stepping on it on accident. For any bee to feel a need to sting. So herbaceous flowers and shrubs are not the only plants that offer pollen to pollinators. Fruit trees, and we're standing in front of some serviceberry trees right here, are actually a great source of pollen. And these trees are just full of activity right now. There's tons of honeybees. I've seen a couple bumblebees. There's a lot of different tiny bees that I haven't been able to identify. There's a lot of flies. So this is a really great food source in the spring for our pollinators. So some other bugs that I found on these serviceberry trees are flies. Flies are really common pollinators, and it can be really hard to tell bees and flies apart. They both fly really fast. They're very suspicious of us getting close. Flies are almost even harder to tell because they never stay still, it seems like. But there are a couple that are mimics of bees. We call them bee flies or drone flies or hover flies, and some of them are black and yellow. So they're actually mimicking the coloration of bees and wasps. And it can be hard to tell if you're seeing a bee or a wasp at first until they slow down and stop. So when we take a closer look at this one, we're gonna notice on our fly, if you're looking at it from above, it's got kind of a triangular shaped head, whereas a bee's head is a little bit more rounded. Our flies only have 2 wings, whereas bees have 4 wings, and that can be kind of hard to tell, but just so you know. Also, our flies have very short, stubby antennae, whereas bees usually have antennae that you can see pretty easily, a little bit longer. So this guy, definitely a fly, not a bee. I also have a fly over here that is one of our typical housefly looking flies. So usually we think of flies as being around trash, but some plants that have co-evolved with flies actually put off a putrid smell. That way they attract flies to them and the flies will pollinate them. There are also mosquitoes are part of our fly order, and a lot of them are responsible for pollinating plants that are in wetlands. So really it's just the females that feed on our blood. All the males and the females, when they're not trying to lay eggs, will be pollinating flowers as well. They'll be feeding on nectar. Another notable fly, there's a tiny midge that's responsible for pollinating cacao, which is where we get cocoa powder and chocolate from. So flies are definitely important pollinators. So the last pollinator that I found today is a butterfly, probably everybody's favorite pollinator. There's really no one particular spot in the gardens to go to look for butterflies. You know, they like really wide open spaces, sunny areas. They're really attracted to lots of different bright colors like reds and yellows and oranges and purples. So just keep your eyes peeled the whole time you're in the gardens if you're looking for butterflies especially. In the spring in Utah, I've already seen cabbage whites, I've seen a sulfur, I've seen a mourning cloak, and a comma. So there are quite a diverse group of butterflies that are already out early in the season. Well, that was a great pollinator safari we went on today. Check back in with us later this summer and we'll see what other pollinators we can find when there are different flowers in bloom. If you like this video, like it, subscribe so you can see more, and share with your friends. That way they can join in on the fun. Thanks, and see you next time.